All right, let's start the lecture on arrays and functions. Our goal for this lecture is to understand how arrays work with functions. That is, how can we pass arrays to functions as arguments, and how can we receive arrays back, and how can a function return an array back to the calling function. And also, we are going to understand how pass by reference works in functions. So we have done, and we're going to understand the difference between pass by value and pass by reference. We have lectured extensively on pass by value with regards to functions. So please make sure you understand how pass by value works and what it means. Make sure you review those slides, and also make sure to watch the lecture right before this one for this week, which was the review of pass by value in functions. Once you understand pass by value, then you should look at this lecture, which is going to explain pass by reference. So please make sure you are comfortable with how functions work, and you're comfortable with how memory diagrams for functions work, and how functions are represented in memory. So a couple of questions. First of all, can we pass an array to a function? The answer is yes, we can, but only by reference. And we're going to extend on this a little bit more. I'm going to talk about what by reference exactly means, and we're going to examine this very carefully. Can a function return an array? Can a return type of a function be an array, basically? And yes, that is possible as well. And we're going to look at examples of these. So first of all, passing an array to a function. Consider an array called float data. So it's an array of floats. And we have a function called calculate sum. The return value is a float, and we are passing an array of float just like we are passing an any other variable. So the type of this parameter is an array of floats. Going back to slides. So if you have void setup, and void setup has int, let's call it data, and then we just have an int a. Let's say we have a function foo. I'm just going to call it void, so it's easier. If I want to pass my array and my integer to this function, and something is happening here, we don't really care. Basically, the function call would be foo. And I'm just going to pass my array, and I'm going to pass my integer. And that's basically it. When I receive them, I'm saying that I'm going to receive, first of all, an integer array, and I can call it anything, right? I'm calling anything x. And I'm saying that I'm passing you an integer, and I can call that y. So it's as simple as that, and there's nothing to it. So here I am I am passing data, which is an array, and I'm passing my integer over here. The memory diagram for this is going to be a little interesting. So I have setup. Setup has data. Data is 1, 2, and 3. And I have A, which is garbage at this point. Actually, we should make a correction here, because if you try to send a variable to a function and there's garbage inside of that variable, it hasn't been initialized, processing complaints. So please do make a correction here. So this should be, let's initialize A to, let's say, 10. So A has 10 inside. Then we are going to call foo. So when we call foo, function foo is created in memory. Now, the way this actually works in memory, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more as we go on, but basically the way it goes is that arrays are always passed by reference. Other variables are always passed by value. What does that mean? That means that X is an array and Y is being passed by value. So we are passing A by value to Y. That means that we're going to copy the value of A into Y. This is going to be 10. Then we are passing this array, we are passing data into this function. We are not going to pass an array by value. Processing only receives arrays by reference only. This is really efficient because when you receive something by value, you're copying its content over. To copy a content of an array, it's going to take a long time because arrays can be huge. Arrays can have like 1 million elements. So to copy all of that, it's going to be very, very slow. So instead, what processing does is it gives you a reference. So X is in fact a link to data. That's the difference essentially between passed by value and passed by reference. What this means now, is in here, I could go and I could say Y is 20. So now Y is going to change here and Y is going to be 20. When I change Y, A does not change at all, right? When I change Y in foo, A doesn't change because Y and A are not connected whatsoever. Y is a copy of A. But if I make changes to X, data is going to change. So if I say X index 0 equals 7, what happens is it says X index 0 is 7. If I say X index 1 is 8, we're going to get X comes and it goes to index 1 and it's going to change this to 8. So when foo finishes, now this is the last line in foo finishes, that's what you have. This link no longer exists, and that's what we end up with. So we have data contains 7, 8, and 3, and A is still 3. And that's pass by reference. That's the only thing that we mean when we say pass by reference. So we're going to There is an exception of how you can change arrays, and I'm going to talk about that. But before we talk about that, I want to show a couple examples of how arrays work.